Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Jakarta Tech Talk. My name is Serena, and joining us today is Buhake, who will be presenting on the topic of migrating from Java EE to Jakarta EE challenges and opportunities. If you have any questions for Buhake as we move through today's presentation, feel free to ask them in the chat or use the Ask a Questions tab. Without any further delay, Buhake, it's over to you.
Good morning to those who are in the US or around 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. For us who are in Africa and in Europe or in Asia, it's either good afternoon or good evening. As the presenter already said, my name is Bohake and I'm speaking from the sunny and warm side of South Africa. Right now I'm in Sandton, so apparently the economic hub of Africa. And yeah, so without further ado, I would like to talk about Jakarta EE 10 and what I've learned and the challenges and opportunities. Okay, so yeah, so basically that's my topic. So briefly who I am, I'm a full stack engineer and developer. So I've basically done Jakarta EE or Java EE application full stack development for over 17 years. Initially started at IBM and then now I play with Open Liberty. So, and then over the years, I became a Jakarta EE developer, and I also run a nonprofit called DevOps for Kids South Africa, where we basically go to communities, especially with schools and areas where kids do not have access to computers and computer classes, and then we're trying to teach them how to code. And where you can find me, basically online, I'm very active on X. It was formerly called Twitter, but you can email me. You can see my link tree where I am. You can also find me on Instagram or LinkedIn. I'm very active on social media. So, okay. So to begin the talk, migration. What's it? There is time in a developer's life or in a business where your application needs to be migrated. So we would like to find out whether you are ready to migrate your application. So the reason you want to upgrade your application, most corporates run on a license-based approach. So they have a license agreement with or service level agreement with their suppliers. And then to reach those service level agreement, certain things have to be put in checks and balances, especially when you are audited every year by, like for example, us with the Securities Exchange, if you are a public listed company. The certain reason might be needed to update your applications, so like outdated technology, also security vulnerabilities like the 0 day that we had, Log4j 0 day. I remember where I used to work for an automotive company in South Africa. We had a weekend we got an email and saying, listen, we have to all upgrade our applications, upgrade to the latest Log4j, or if you don't have Log4j, move it out, and certain things had to be moved. And we literally had less than a week to get it all fixed because the auditors were coming to make sure that we were not vulnerable to attacks. Cost efficiency, sometimes vendors will probably expire your previous version, so you need to upgrade to latest version. So if your suppliers are Jakarta EE or Java EE compliant, usually they will tell you we recommend this, and then you'll have to upgrade. And also long-term sustainability. So yeah, and many more. So various approaches, there are various approaches to migration. Either you are reactive, so there's either proactive or reactive. Either you know that you know what we need to, it's time for migration and update is around the corner. So there's either tackle it and then see what challenges are ahead and then resolve it, or something happened, or like you got attacked or whatever, and then you decide, okay, fine, there's a reason to migrate, and then you migrate. So there are very reason also why circumstances why you need to migrate as well. And certain strategies, common ones are, for example, you need to rehost. Now there's a big push to go to the cloud. So there's good challenges and opportunities to move to the cloud. So I know, like, for example, Payara are pushing Payara Cloud very extensively, even the IBMs, and so with Azure and AWS as well. So there's a lot of opportunities to move to the cloud, and Jakarta EE and Eclipse Microprofile are all focusing on, for example, on cloud strategies as well. And so, which will also lead you to like replatforming. So if you want to be cloud compliant, you have a Jakarta EE application, what other technologies you can use from Jakarta EE to make sure that it's also cloud compliant, for example. And there is one as well, purchasing or refactoring, which obviously part of your migration will be part of refactoring or re-architecture. Sometimes you might need to decommission your applications and then rebuild newer ones with the newest technology, or your application is as good as is, and you just need to move it to the newest platform without needing to change anything, so you can just retain it and just push it. Okay, the brief history, just to catch up on Jakarta EE. So right now we're on Jakarta EE 10. There's a big push now lately, if you've been active on social media, about future talks about Jakarta EE 11, which is coming, I think, in a few weeks' time. So there's a big push of Jakarta EE 10. And yeah, so Jakarta EE is basically Java EE, which has been donated to the Eclipse platform. So the underlying technologies are still the same, but there are a few possible changes now. We can't use the Java or Java X namespace because it's still copyrighted by Oracle, so we use Jakarta, for example. But if you come from a Java EE background, you will be very comfortable using Jakarta EE. And Jakarta EE today, so it's very visible. The release cycle is very visible. They're very open. So they do advertise when they're going to about the next release and which technology has been approved, or which technology are probably going to be relooked and reworked at. So it is very visible, and they're quick also to adopt to latest technologies like cloud adoption, like NoSQL, for example. Those are the big push now in the market, and the Java EE and the Jakarta EE community, or Jakarta EE community, basically are very active as well. And also it's very open source, so if you want to contribute, it is easy for them to join the community and then also give contribution as well. And then also they're quick to adopt to the latest Java technology like Java Records, and also with virtual threads coming in Java 21. There's also a look into possibility of adopting to virtual threading. And then in Jakarta EE 11, Java 21 is coming in 19th of September, so a couple of weeks' time. And in the first quarter of 2024, so basically Jakarta EE 11, so it gives time for them to do build testing and, and have a nice general GA release for everybody to play with. And then I always get asked this question, especially in South Africa, because majority of Spring developers and many are using Spring framework. And then they were like, why do you look at Jakarta EE or Java EE and not Spring, because Spring has major adoption? But I always say Spring and Java EE are not enemies basically, but they are friends actually. So if you look at this release, you'll see that certain technology that is Spring uses Java EE basically. So in November, when 6.1 for Spring comes in, it will use Jakarta EE 10 certain libraries or certain frameworks from Jakarta EE anyway. So we are not enemies, we're actually quite friends, and we adopt some technologies we adopt from Spring to Jakarta EE. For example, batching. So the batching framework came from, basically looks identical to Spring batching, but the technology came from Spring framework actually. So we are friends actually. That's what I'm trying to say. And certain technologies from servlets to JPA to JMS, even CDI and annotations come, Spring uses it. So if you write, for example, many of our institutions, for example, writes enterprise Spring application with JSF as a front end. So JSF is basically Jakarta EE web framework, component-based framework for presentation, basically. So we did a quick survey. That was when I went to JCon. So I'm going to just skip through it. 72% still run application on Java 17. So people are quickly adopting to the latest JDK. Very few are still on Java 20. Well, usually it's very difficult, especially here with a lot of policies in place to get quick adoption by businesses, because you do not fix what's not broken, basically. Close to 50% uses Java EE, which is quite amazing. The biggest among Java EE is still Java EE 8. But if you're still using Java EE 8, you can jump to Jakarta EE 8 because without any hassles, basically. But ideally, we still got a long way to go for, especially in Africa, to actually use Jakarta EE, but we're still getting there. Majority still use Spring Framework. There's nothing new. Like it's also in South Africa, it's very difficult to find jobs that's actually people where they use Java EE or Jakarta EE full stack, full out. And surprisingly enough, Tomcat is still the biggest application server or container or serverless container that people still deploy the applications. And majority still run Babel. But yeah, and the second biggest is Wildfly, which I've also been proponent as of for the few years before I jumped to Open Liberty. And for cloud, 70% is still Spring Boot, but ultimately there's now I see this push for Herodon, Quarkus, and Micronaut. But that's future talk for future tech talk, basically. But ideally, why my proponent is always, if your application runs on, if you deploy your application, whether it's a Spring Boot application or a full-on Jakarta EE or your own Java EE application on an application server, you're basically running a Jakarta EE, basically, because most of your enterprise application server, whether it's licensed or open source, are Java EE or Jakarta EE compliant. So yeah, and so now that we looked at it, let's look at how we can actually migrate your application, whether it's from Java EE or your Spring Boot or whatever. But if you're using you still using Java EE technologies, how can you apply to your Jakarta EE 10? So the first thing I always say to people, always read the manual. The manual is usually a good place to see exactly what's on the release and what has changed from previous versions of the release to the current version. And yeah, for example, when I moved my application from JSF 2.3 to JSF 4, which is a Jakarta EE 10 version of, which is basically Jakarta EE 10. On Jakarta EE 10, a lot of things changed, not that much, but I think I saw a lot of things that were generified that my code was, that in JSF 2.3 did not use a lot of generics. Like, for example, your renderers and your converters now used a lot of generics, and a lot of code changes had to be done over there as well. And then you choose your Jakarta EE 10 compatible products. So on the website, the certified Jakarta EE 10 are basically from your Glassfish to WebSphere Open Liberty, IBM WebSphere Liberty as well, Payara as well. So the three biggest that I've used, Open Liberty, Wildfly, and well, Glassfish and Payara are the same, but different. I've used them extensively. Some even deployed on the cloud. So it's not a trace rate for me when I write the application on one and then try and deploy it on the other. If all the configuration is done correctly, you don't have to change anything on your code. You just deploy and it runs smoothly with no issues at all. The other one is your pom.xml. Your pom.xml, initially you would specify your JavaX, Java EE API, your GAV. So for example, the last one of my code was Java EE 6, and I migrated to the Jakarta platform, Jakarta EE API to version 10. And always keep the scope provided, because if you deploy it into a container, the container has the full-on implementation of Jakarta EE frameworks and specs, so you don't have to worry about how the thing is going to operate. All you have to do is just write your code and Bob's your uncle. The next one, which usually that's when you need a good IDE, you rename your JavaX import. So everything that starts with JavaX that you imported on your code will be renamed to Jakarta dot whatever. So basically, the prefix namespace that starts with JavaX will just need to be renamed to Jakarta. And then the rest of the namespace does not change, which is very beautiful, because if you have your IDEs, like your IntelliJ and your Eclipse and Visual Studio Code, it will tell you, I could not find your JavaX package, but I see there's a Jakarta package of the same name. Do you want to replace it? And then you just replace, and then your code is clean as ever. And then your Java EE is supposed to be Jakarta EE 10. Forget Java EE 10. Jakarta EE 10 application containers is no longer backward compatible with Java EE application. So you can't take your Java EE code, so anything that's still run with a Java X dot whatever package, and deploy to Jakarta EE 10. It will not see it. It will give you errors like these namespaces or these libraries they cannot be found. I actually forgot what the exception is actually called. But yeah, and your deployment will fail. And then for those that still runs your XML files, and then so your XML namespaces will have to change. So where you had your XML namespace, your JCP, you need to change it to Jakarta.EE. So your namespaces that was prefixed with the jcp.org, just change it to Jakarta.EE, and then your namespaces, and then the suffix later is exactly the same. And also change your version number. For example, your JSF, if you're grinding from JSF 2.3 to JSF 4, and if you just change the namespace, it will still not work. You will just have to change the version as well. So as you change the XMLs that you have to be aware of are your civlets, your JPA, your CDI, your validations, your badge. If you write in your own tag libs, and JSF as well. So those are the prominent ones that I'm familiar with. They still have XML declarations. Just ensure that you change your namespaces and your SSD versions. Also, your properties file, your XML where there's property configurations. If you still have your Java X property that's still got a Java X prefix, you just have to rename it to Jakarta, and then your suffixes are still the same. For example, your CDI service extension, you had the Java X Enterprise Inject SPI extension, you just change to Jakarta. You see that the suffixes are exactly the same. It's just that Java X and Jakarta has been changed. This is JSF. This I did not include to JCon, but I included here because it does change. For example, if you are creating your own your own faceless pages, or your faces pages, you usually have to specify your namespaces in order to use JSF. Like, for example, your core, your JSTR core, your faces core, your pass-through attributes, and whatever. So before JSF, JSF 2.2, before JSF 2.2, we had java.sun.com, and then your naming for your namespace, and then from 2.2 we went to XML your jcp.org, as I previously said, and then from JSF 2 onwards we went on jcp.org, but from there to now, we moved from jcp.org to JSF4, where we do not have like a URL-based namespace. We have shorthand names, for example. So we have like Jakarta. So your faces core is jakarta.faces.core. Your HTML is jakarta.faces.html. Your facelet is so basically it's got jakarta.faces and then whatever it is. So if it's a composite, it's a composite. If it's a function, it's a function. Pass-through. The only thing that hasn't changed is the JSTL core. It doesn't have a shortened name yet. But on JSF4, we basically gave a shortened name for your namespaces. And basically, your XHTML looks like this now. So your namespaces now Jakarta.faces or whatever. But all the tag libraries, your tag elements, your JSF specific tag elements or whatever, are exactly the same as before. So there's nothing that's changed. It's just that the namespace names have changed. And your faces config, as I was trying to show, this is your JSF4. as you can see, your schema location has changed to Jakarta EE, and the suffixes of the URL is still the same. So it's still web config, except that it's now 4.0.ssd, because we're trying to use the latest version of JSF. And then for those that are using prime faces, from prime faces 10, you can use Jakarta EE namespace. By default, it defaults to java.x. So you have to specify a classifier to say Jakarta, so that you can see that you know what you are trying to use Jakarta. You running on a Jakarta EE container, and it's going to use the Jakarta namespace. If you don't, it will try and pick up Java X libraries, especially for JSF, and then it will say, you know what? No, I can't find anything. So on your pom.xml, this is the latest prime faces version. So your GAV is exactly the same. The only thing that you specify is your classifier to be Jakarta, and then it will apply the Jakarta EE namespaces and the imports as well. And then here, rename files prefix to Java X. So this is an example of your JPA persistent of XML. You'll see, for example, the schema location is told this is version 2.1. So this is prior Jakarta EE. So if you came from the Java EE world, this is how you would declare your persistence.xml. You'll see like your properties. There's certain persistent properties that are default standard based on the specification. You'll see it's called javax.persistence, javax.persistence. So to convert that to the latest version of JPA that exists on Jakarta EE10, you will just have to do this, which change the version to version 3, which is the latest version of JPA on Jakarta EE10, and then you'll see your properties where it says now it's changed to Jakarta.persistence. Whatever that you want to call it. But everything is exactly the same. The only thing that's changed is the version. The schema location now says Jakarta.EE, as I've previously mentioned. And then all the properties that was Java X dot has been replaced to Jakarta dot whatever. So that's basically that. And then once you're done, you just have to test your, why do I still say Java EE10? It's supposed to be Jakarta EE10. My apologies, I've made mistakes as well. So you should test your application. So for example, I'll run the latest version of OpenLiberty, which I will show. That's how I test my application that it is Jakarta EE10 compliant. So what are the challenges, basically? API and package renaming. So if you do not have a good IDE, for example, to fix your imports and to, especially if you do like dynamic class loading, for example, where you instantly write your class name in a quoted string where it says Java X or whatever. If you do not have a good IDE to look for anything that says Java X and replace it to Jakarta, you might have an issue where you think of loading, do dynamic loading of a specific class or doing a dynamic injection, and then suddenly you come into an error because you still have a Java X package name on there. So a good IDE that can spot the difference, especially like IntelliJ and most modern IDEs right now support Jakarta EE10. So it is very efficient in spotting differences to know like, oh, this I can replace with that. Your imports are easy to do, but then there are those ones where some people really hard code like package names and class names, especially in an XML, in a configuration file or a properties file where it's not easily picked up. So a good IDE where you literally have to find all of that and just manually fix that is very, it can be very cumbersome to do. Dependency management, especially for third-party libraries, you know, you may be under a strict deadline to migrate your application to Java EE10, and then you are stuck on libraries that are not even Jakarta EE compliant. That can cause a delay in your release cycle. But sometimes there are some things that are out of your control, but there is a solution to it, which I'll explain later. Like Eclipse Transformer, which can actually go into your dependencies and then dynamically and then change your imports or your packages into a Jakarta EE compliant. And then certain APIs, for example, get deprecated. For example, in the future, I think EJBs will be phased out. So you just have to be aware which packages, which frameworks are getting deprecated, and find alternate solutions to it. And that's where I always say read the manual, because the manual always tells you like, or the release cycle of each of the release of newer frameworks or the newer version of Jakarta EE. It will tell you what has been added and what has been removed. And what opportunities are there? One, compatibility. So if you're already in a Jakarta EE, like you in Jakarta EE, you've been from Jakarta EE8 to move to Jakarta EE9 and 10 isn't difficult at all. You just probably change the version of your technology that you're using, like your JPA or your JSF, for example. But it still has backward compatibility with previous releases of Jakarta EE. For those that don't know, the namespaces from Java X to Jakarta has changed, I think, from Jakarta EE9, because Jakarta EE8 still adopted the Java X namespace, but it was part now of the Eclipse Foundation. So from Jakarta EE9, we moved to Jakarta namespaces, and so it was no longer backward compatible with Java EE namespaces. So even though we're not backward compatible with Java EE frameworks and libraries, but if you still in Jakarta EE from 8 onwards, it can still run. Open rewrite. So this I heard when I was overseas. So with the complexity, for example, as I spoke earlier, to do refactoring, companies like Open Rewrite actually created tools to refactor your code to the latest. For example, if you say Jakarta EE10, it can help you with automatically refactoring your code and your imports. What it doesn't do yet, which Eclipse Transformer does, is renaming like your imports on bytecode level or already pre-compiled libraries already. So, but this is also a very good tool. For example, if you have your existing code base that you wanna make it quickly compliant to the latest release of Jakarta EE10, Open Rewrite is there. I spoke about Eclipse Transformer. It provides a tool to actually transform your libraries to the latest release, from your class files to your boot, to your WAR files and jar files, or even third parties, and also changes to properties files and resources. So this is actually quite advanced form of Open Rewrite. So I haven't used it yet because most of for me personally, all my code at Java EE were written extensively using Java EE framework. So for me, I've never had issues migrating to Jakarta EE. So I haven't used Eclipse Transformer to actually change my code of third parties because we don't really use third-party libraries unless we really necessarily need it. And the third-party libraries that we mostly use are prime faces, and they've already sorted that portion out. And performance. So by migrating to Jakarta EE, you can take advantage of performances. So every suppliers, for example, or companies that are part of the Jakarta EE ecosystem releases the application server that provide also enhanced security and all these good features. So by writing your application, you don't have to worry about securing your application on that level. The containers will do that. So you leverage out of the hard work that most of the suppliers and manufacturers have actually done for you. So cloud native ready. The deployment to the cloud is very easy. For example, your containers, most of your containers are already, you can find them already on Docker, so you can actually Dockerize your application from the get-go, and then create a CI/CD workflow to deploy to your cloud provider of choice, whether it's AWS or Microsoft Azure. For example, what we did as well, we took application that we moved to that is running on Payara, and we've basically Dockerized all of that. We moved it into, we created a workflow, a pipeline on Jenkins that actually takes the code, builds it, Dockerizes it, and then deploys it into to our Azure instances. And then when the customer actually browses the application, is actually from an application that's running on Azure Cloud. But all the application is actually Dockerized. So when we get new teams involved, they basically environment the PCs of choice, and then they just have to get the ID of choice, the code, and then run it into their own virtual Dockerized environment, test, push, and then the workflow kicks in for deployment and testing and all of that stuff. And also your monolith application can be migrated to cloud native. We've done, that's exactly what I've just discussed now. And you can, and if you want to go fully cloud native, Eclipse Microprofile also leverages also on Jakarta EE technologies like Jakarta EE10, and I think Eclipse Microprofile is version 3.2, or if I'm not mistaken. So the added advantage of Jakarta EE plus few of the frameworks like open tracing and all of that stuff combined together, and you have a cloud-ready, you can build your cloud-ready applications, microservices that can run in the cloud as well. And that's the end of my talk. I can show you the code on how I did ours if I still got time.
You do, Buhaki. You have some time. Okay. I'm just going to take a quick look at the questions to see if anybody has asked any questions. So no questions were submitted.
Okay.
In the Ask a Questions tab, and no questions were submitted in the chat. So.
All right. So, what is this? Okay, so for some reason, yeah, it always happened. I just started Windows, and then looks like my server hasn't started yet. Why? I thought by now I should have my server running. So my database is on. It's a Docker container. So okay, so before I do that, let me start with Eclipse. Okay, so we're basically building a billing system for those in the medical field. So that basically this is for those in I was going to say hospitality, but it's not hospital. It's not hospitality in the medical sector. So this application, and it says I've got a code that's broken. So something broke, and I don't know what it is, and I haven't touched any code yet. So this is a JS application. Something broke. What broke? Let me fix this quickly before. The funny thing is, this thing worked yesterday, and I haven't touched it since yesterday.
That's okay.
And why? Yeah, no, it's not okay because what is it? It is. Oh, am I not seeing things just written? Oh, I have no idea. Okay, let me start from the very beginning. All right. Here's my com.xml. And what this helps, I need to plug my charger. Okay, so my OpenLBT is starting Jakarta EE 10 over here. If it does, okay, so this application runs Jakarta EE 10 here, which as I said before, is scope provided. And also I'm trying to play with Jakarta data, which I'm going to go into in the near future, but for now, I know Jakarta EE11 is going to come with Jakarta data, so I'm trying to anticipate for that already. And it's got Postgres and all of that good features on there. And I'm using OpenLBT as my container, which is version 23. And I've got my Liberty plugin and my War plugin. And then, since I'm using JSF, okay, so to enable CDI, I've got version 4 of CDI 4, which also uses Jakarta EE version beans.xml. You just have to leave it blank. It will, by default, your bean discovery mode must be annotated. So when you annotate your beans, it knows that it needs to inject it. Your JSF, as I said, it's version 4. The schema location is jakarta.ee namespace. Resource is exactly the same. Nothing else has changed over here. And web.xml, your web.xml, what you need to look at is version 6, your Jakarta EE namespace. And then, since I'm using JSF, for example, here where I said exception, that should be Jakarta, not Java X. Even I make mistakes. So your Jakarta view expiration exception will send me to a logout page, which will automatically log me out. And your properties for JSF as well, as you can see, is Jakarta.faces, and then your project stage. So all of these properties do exist as specified on the specification, but it now says Jakarta dot whatever, so default suffix. But all these elements and whatever is still the exact same thing as your web.xml when it was still Java EE6 or Java EE7. And what else have I done, which is your Open Liberty server.xml. I just said your feature will be Jakarta EE10. And only thing is JDBC. Your JDBC does not have jakarta.sql.data source or XA data source. It still uses Java X. That's the only thing that doesn't change is your JDBC. Because I tried changing that to Jakarta and it was not happy. Other than that, everything else is exactly the same. These are your configuration. But the one thing I wanted to show you, this was one of the modules I wrote to move everything to I was trying to do the whole HTML5 components, basically. And is it this thing? And your facelet tag library is still Jakarta EE, nothing has changed. But everything else is exactly the same. What is faces config? Your faces config, here, if I'm not mistaken, no, your computers are still the same. Here, previously it was called manage bean. So manage bean has changed to reference bean. So there's one thing that you need to look at. If you want to create your own taglib library, your custom library for JSF, so change that to reference bean, and then everything else. And then, so here it used to be manage bean name and manage bean class. So that has changed, and there used to be something called description is exactly the same. So this used to be manage B, manage-B, now it's called reference B. I had that issue earlier, and why is this thing not? And it says launched. So let's see if it's actually launched. Where is my VD? HTTP localhost 9080. Oh my God, I got too many Chrome open. But here we go. Still not up. Ah, gee. What is going on? Okay, this is unusual. Normally doesn't take 30 seconds, 7 seconds. No. Something is not right. Oh God. What? Well, my OpenLBT is running, but configuration is not working. Am I at the correct place? Let me stop this quickly. Ah. Great. I forgot. Sorry, it's my fault. It is definitely my fault. I started putting security. That's why it's faded.
Okay, we just have about 3 more minutes to wrap up.
Yeah. Sorry. Oh God. I knew I did. I knew something was going to happen last minute. So yeah, other than that, all of my code has been. Oh no, oh no. All of my code has been the same. It has not really changed. So, for example, the login form has been exactly the same. I'm still using CDI named. So nothing has changed in terms of implementation. Managed property is still the same. Security, I'm using the latest security, so I can write my custom identity store, and here I'm still busy implementing the authentication. But the whole point is the latest security framework allows us to create custom identity store. So I'm trying to use custom identity store to do login, and from there you can use your security context to pass your username, password, credential to here, and your security context has existed from Java EE already. So your knowledge in using Java EE application hasn't really changed. The only thing that has changed is basically your imports and all of that stuff. So there's no Java X or whatever. This is my custom faces utils, but everything else is Jakarta. The Jakarta imports what used to be Java X dot enterprise dot request scope, which is CDI request scope. It's exactly the same. There's nothing else that has changed. This should now be This one. Yay! So there's a JSF front-end page. This is brand new, so it's still brand new development. So we're taking existing stuff that worked on previous code, and we just decided to do a whole rewrite with Jakarta EE10. So this is the registration form, your login form. So using JSF for any trans, and if I make code changes here, Open Liberty is running on development mode, and even JSF is on development mode. So any changes here, it will automatically redeploy it, and then you just have to refresh your browser and see your changes. So basically, what it does a watch on your project. So it does a watch, and then whatever changes, whether it's code, whether it's resources, whether it's your JSF HTML pages, it watches all of that, and then it does auto redeployment for you. So you don't have to shut down the container. So yeah, that's pretty much it. If anybody has any questions, yeah, I'm very open.
And it doesn't look like there's any questions in the Ask a Questions tab or in the chat. So we are good to go, Buhaki. I appreciate your presentations. Thank you all so much for your time today. And you have yourselves all a wonderful day. Take care.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.